UFC 266 has finally arrived, and with it comes the long-awaited turn of Alexander Volkanovski as he finally defends his belt against Brian Ortega. At the same time, Shevchenko takes on Lauren Murphy in another title fight. And even ignoring those, there are some fun-looking fights in the heavyweight division. Dan Hooker takes the stage, and for a fight that I'm not sure anyone wanted, Nick Diaz versus Robbie Lawler. Let's begin with always with the early prelims, the fights that very few people care about and doing research is a pain for. Fiora, Silva. 7-1, Beast Fiora looks to add another in the win column against a 1-1, Shiara, Bueno, Silva, with a 1-inch height and reach advantage favoring Silva. Now off the bat, I need to say that Fiora only has 2 fights in the UFC, and based on that, she comes across as a finisher, both by TKO KO wins in the second round with major striking leads. Important to note, both these finishes came later in the round, 3 and 4 minute mark, and that tells me she's got a gas tank. She's got the ability to keep going and pour pressure on when she needs to. On the complete other side is Silva, who has 5 fights in the UFC, and of those 3, 1 by submission. One was unanimous decision loss, and the other was a majority draw. Definitely a grappler, and is normally not the one to initiate the takedowns, but does take advantage of them. Striking is her major weakness, though. Landed and absorbed being equal, but also in the loss, she was severely outstruck by his opponent. I'm talking 139-88. In a fight like this, it really comes down to, does it end up on the ground? And Fiora does have a takedown in her 2 fights. I don't imagine she uses it here. The winner of this fight is determined by if it goes to the canvas, and the Vegas odds favor Fiora. I'm going to follow. She's based on how the fact she builds these heavy striking leads and finishes her opponents. Silva relies on how quickly she gets to the canvas and how to win there. I imagine this fight stays on the feet. Fiora. Robertson, Maximoff. The 9-4 Baby K. Robertson looks to stop the slide against Contender Series fresh blood Nick Maximoff. 7-year age gap of the two favoring and 2-inch reach all favoring Maximoff. Same time, Maximoff is apparently dropping 2 weight classes for this fight, though he was a 220-pound heavyweight, meaning he's basically dropping 1 from light heavyweight to heavy. Here, Robertson is very much a ground control and submission artist fighter. Literally all of his wins come by submission, all of his losses, bar 1, coming also by submission. His striking is not great, equal across both, but he uses it effectively enough to set up his ground game. It is interesting to note that he is not super aggressive on the takedowns and tends to let it go down when people shoot in, not bothering to really defend at all. He also has a good deal of rounds in the later parts of a fight, so it looks like his gas tank can hold, or he uses it very sparingly. And to talk about Maximoff, I had to dig. His fights elsewhere, he's come across as a grappler. However, many of his recent fights were just straight grappling bouts, not full MMA fights. He seems to be very good at handling opponents on the ground, but that's at the 220-pound heavyweight mark. So picking a winner here is pretty hard, because my easy out has the fighters dead even, thank you Vegas, and I don't know how good at the full game Maximoff is. Comparatively, obviously, he's more skilled than majority to make it this far, but here I'm going to pick Robertson. Experience in the UFC, this is his normal weight division. Maximoff's dropping 220 to 185. 186 to be honest, but I don't care. Smellsberger, Sano. 8-3 Matthew Semi the Jedi Smellsberger wins the worst ring name in history and looks to rebound against the 4-2 UFC rookie Martin Sano. 2-year age advantage and 2-inch height, all favoring Smellsberger. Now, Semi the Jedi is a striking heavy fighter, a lot of punches thrown, a lot of punches absorbed, and he does have finishing power, as long as it lands right. Otherwise, he comes across as more of a swarming kind of thing. He overwhelms you and he beats you by just sheer amount. He has shown some sort of takedown game. He landed 2 in one fight. He hasn't had a single one since, though. So I don't know if that was just because it was the opponent or if he's just kind of moved away from it entirely. On that train of thought, question how his chin holds up and yada yada, but that's up in the air and that's all the future. Martin Sano, on the other hand, is the rookie and seems to be a grappling heavy fighter. In his professional fights, he has had 2 losses, back-to-back by decision and punches, so this looks to be a fight between 2 opposing styles. Based on the information I don't really have, Sano, his striking might be good, it might not. grappling is the one thing I've been able to notice he is very good with. So picking a winner here feels like a game of chance, and I'm going to follow Vegas and just go with Semi the Jedi despite his awful ring name. I think being able to strike a lot versus somebody who seems to be focused more on grappling and keeping it on the feet is more to his advantage. But now, on to the prelims with an exciting note. Moraes Develashvili. I am so sorry for that name. 23-8, Magic Moraes looks to rebound against the surging 13-4 Machine Develashvili, with a 3-year age and inch reach advantage all going to the Machine. Now, Moraes is this interesting fighter. He's shown semblances of a well-rounded game. Little bits of striking and grappling working well together in his fights. However, immediately noticed, striking absorbed is higher than his landed, though. And the ground game is where a bit more of his talent shines. He averages 1 takedown a fight with 41% accuracy. Overall, he's definitely a finisher. However, he has seemed to have gone a little cold. On the other hand, the Machine has close to double the strikes landed to absorb, averages about 7.38 takedowns across his fights. He's very much more so the grinder, dominates the fight, multiple takedowns, multiple control, just keeps coming at you, coming quick, coming hard, you don't get time to breathe. Because of that, he is the favorite fighter, and I'm going to agree. Moraes is not bad. 41% accuracy and the poor strikes absorbed total doesn't look to go well by somebody who is so quick, so aggressive, and so persistent on takedowns and grinding. Having it like that, I think, paints it as more of a weakness instead of a strength. Hooker Haqparast. 20-10, Hangman Hooker looks to get back in the win column against the 13-3 Nasrat Haqparast, with Haqparast taking a 5-year age advantage, Hooker taking an inch in height and reach. Hooker is entirely a member of the swing and bang style of fighting, with the familiar equal strikes landed to equal strikes absorbed. It's important to note he does have the ability to go for takedowns, but just kind of doesn't. He tends to overwhelm his opponents with his striking. On the same note, Haqparast does have a 5.81 landed per minute, but on a different note, he only has 3.23 absorbed. It's a closer total, but having it that difference kind of matters. And then you put it in context, and it really doesn't for this fight. He overwhelms his opponents as well, but he has not faced anyone like Hangman. So neither really have a takedown game, so I'm not going to talk about it. But when it comes to striking, this is a question of who have you fought. And that leads to the interesting thing here. He's landed more strikes than he's absorbed, yes, but he hasn't fought anyone like Hooker, who is willing to go swing for you. Now, that leads to Hooker being the favorite here, experience versus not. I'm going to have to agree, just because Haqparast hasn't fought anyone like Hooker, and Hooker's willing to come in, swing, and get hit to put you down. So I don't imagine that his striking defense will hold up all that well against a lot of sudden punches, and giving up too much will lead to you getting knocked out, probably. Next up, we have a heavyweight division fight, which means I care a little more. Abdurakhimov versus Daukaus. 20-10, Abrek Abdurakhimov looks to rebound against 11-3 Chris Daukaus. 9-year age advantage to Daukaus with a 3-inch reach advantage, and also to Daukaus. Abdurakhimov comes into this with an honestly odd spread of stats for the heavyweight division. He has an equal landed and absorbed, not that odd. But he averages 1.23 takedowns across his fights. His accuracy, though, is only 24%. And a 47 on takedown defense. So he seems to be more willing to let himself go to the ground than initiate the takedown, which is a little odd in heavyweights, I feel like. It might also be because I tend to watch more wrestlers who shoot the takedown harder than some other ground game types. He's proven himself to be skilled in the ground game, changing positions, taking advantage of opportunities, putting himself on top, and opening up ground and pound and submission opportunities. Daukaus, on the other hand, has shown us nothing but striking. However, every fight's ended with a KO. And his striking accuracy and defense have been really good. Crisp punches, crisp movement, good head movement, good coming back, good counters. On the feet is something he excels at from what we've seen, but we don't know anything about the ground. The favorite here is Daukaus, and I'm conflicted on this. Daukaus is a mystery to me. This is like watching Francis Ngannou. You don't know what else he has because he hasn't fought in that capacity. The second Stipe rematch, I didn't know what his ground defense was like. because we hadn't seen it. And that's what we're kind of at with Daukaus. I imagine it exists, but how good is it? We don't know. If this fight goes to the ground, it can swing hard to Abdurakhimov. But as it is now, I'm picking Daukaus. His striking seems very good, and Abdurakhimov striking defense is a big weakness. And with someone as persistent, as good as Daukaus in striking, it changes things. But that puts us into the main event finally. Starting off with Andrade Calvillo. Jessica Batistatka Andrade takes on the 9-2 Cynthia Calvillo. 5-year age advantage, but a 3-inch height and 2-inch reach advantage for Calvillo. Andrade is a fairly well-rounded fighter. Grappling and takedowns being her strengths. Striking is not bad, 50% accuracy, 52% defense. I use well-rounded fighter to say she has very good elements of both games. She does have finishing power, multiple finishes, and has a very good deal of power behind everything she does. It's not just the punching. Her takedowns are powerful. She's able to move opponents around using her body. And Calvillo echoes much of the same stats with this well-rounded nature. However, on the other hand, her finishes come from setting up the ground game. She takes control of a fight, she maintains it. The Vegas odds tilt toward Andrade, and I'm going to agree. Power and experience seem to be a bit more value. Higher strikes landed compared to Calvillo also seems to make a difference. If this fight does go to the ground, it can go either way, because Andrade has the power and experience versus Calvillo seems to have the technique and knack for it. But as it is now, I'm going to trust Vegas, I'm going to trust the veteran Andrade. Back to the heavyweight division though. Blades Rosenstruik. 14-3 Curtis Razor Blades takes on the 12-2 Jairzinho Biggie Boy Rosenstruik. 3-year edge, 2-inch reach, and height advantage for Blades. Blades is heavy into the takedowns, ground control game, averaging 6.64 takedowns across his fights, having multiple ground and pound finishes. Striking is certainly not weak either, though it's low for the heavyweight division. 3.59 landed, but his absorb is also equally low at 1.7. This is one of the people I talk about having the wrestling style, where he's aggressive with the takedowns, he puts himself on top, and he controls from that mounted position. When he does strike, he uses it to set up ground game, set up clinches, set up ways that he can take an opponent to the ground and control. Rosenstruik is a very different fighter, though. He is all in on the striking, not really much of a ground game that exists, but he's a very technical striker. He has definite standing knockout power, never will deny that. But for him, he's very much a guy who can pick his shots and place them well. He's not going to swing as much as Ngannou does, but he will pick shots and place them in ways that will hurt and be placed well. So this is a summary of grappling versus striking. Deciding this is difficult. The Vegas odds favor Blades, and I agree. Rosenstruik has good takedown defense, but it's for how often Blades goes for it that changes up my mind here. Averaging 6.64 a fight, getting one to the ground against Rosenstruik might be a bigger swing than I think I'm even thinking of. I imagine this fight ends up on the ground anyway, and I don't think Rosenstruik will pull off what Derek Lewis did and knock him out with a sort of lazy uppercut. But now we get the old man fight. Diaz Lawler. 28-15 Robbie Ruthless Lawler takes on 26-9 Nick Diaz. 2-inch height and reach going to Diaz. Now, this is a hard fight for me to talk about. Because Robbie has echoes of a well-rounded fighter. Elements of a takedown and ground game are throughout his stats, coming behind good striking based around technique and power in spades. However, his striking now has an issue with a lower landed actual strikes absorbed. He's also on a 4-fight losing streak and is 39 years old. Diaz is also 38 and coming off a no contest in his last fight, which was in 2015. I can't comment on Jack for this fight, because neither fighter is in the greatest part of their career. The stats I'm looking at for Lawler, I have to go back to find meaningful stats, because in these last fights he hasn't looked great. Knockouts, decision losses, and a submission loss, I believe, to Ben Askren in a bulldog choke. What are you supposed to say? Because what Lawler was able to do, I don't think is what he's able to do now. And I don't know what Nick Diaz can do, because it's been 6 years since he was in the octagon. So I don't know how to call this. Vegas odds have it even, so Vegas screwed me here. I'm picking Diaz because why not? At this point, I'm just going to pick a name that might get me. But past that, we're on to the belts. Shevchenko, Murphy. 21-3. Valentina, Bullet, Shevchenko. Looks to keep her belt against the 15-4 Lauren Lucky Murphy. 5-year age favoring Shevchenko, inch reach advantage to Murphy. Shevchenko is a very well-rounded fighter. Good difference between landed and absorbed strikes, good use of takedowns, good use of ground control. She does not use submissions a lot, tending to do the more control and ground and pound, but they are something that has been used and do exist in her repertoire. Majority of her fights, she generates multiple takedowns, being able to use to generate control, disrupt things, or just give herself position. However, Murphy is a decently well-rounded fighter, but she favors the ground game, making use of control over dealing massive amounts of damage. This does tend to keep the fight close, which, depending on your opponent, may or may not backfire horribly. But she's been able to do well enough on the ground to win in the end, and that makes this fight interesting, because Shevchenko uses takedowns fairly often. If Murphy reverses position, keeps it on the ground, we're looking at a very different scenario, because I like Murphy's takedown game. I think it's very good. I think she might have a chance to reverse positions. But I'm going to pick Shevchenko for this fight. Because while Murphy is skilled with the ground game, Shevchenko excels more on her feet and probably will be able to keep it there. If Murphy gets it down or is taken down and controls it, the fight can flip in a heartbeat. But I think Shevchenko will be able to keep it on the feet for this and game plan around Murphy's takedowns. But finally, we're at the main event. 22-1, Alexander the Great Volkanovski takes on 15-1, Brian T. City Ortega, with a 2-year age and 2-inch height advantage going to Ortega, but a 2-inch reach to Volkanovski. Volkanovski is a well-rounded technical fighter, very skilled at striking and capable of using takedowns to disrupt opponents when it matters. Take them down to disrupt, take them down to generate control, take them down to generate ground and pound. He knows when to shoot it. He has a good chin, and he also is able to swing momentum in fights very well. Submissions are not his game, but he does not use them incredibly often, but they are a bag of tricks he might have access to. What I'm really trying to say here in vague bush-beating words, Volkanovski is very good at understanding the fight, reacting to it, and doing enough to win. I'm reminded of the fight against Max Holloway, the last one they had, where he basically won the last 3 rounds of the fight to keep the belt. It was swinging momentum with takedowns, it was changing the striking, it was suddenly switching things up and gaining points in those later rounds. Volkanovski adjusts well. Ortega, on the other hand, is more explosive than Volkanovski. He's more explosive when he comes to knocking people out and finishing them. He does take more punches than he lands, but at the same time, his ground game is very good. He's good at submissions. He's good at changing positions, taking advantage, controlling people on the ground, defending with guard, and all these other things. He's much more explosive. He's much more the finisher rather the technician. That makes this fight interesting. And that makes the Vegas odds. They do go to Volkanovski. They favor the champion. In most cases, unless your name is Stipe Miocic and you're facing Ngannou, that's the case. I have to agree here with a caveat. Ortega is not a bad pick. I like Volkanovski's technical more. That's why I'm picking him. Ortega is much more explosive, but I don't imagine that he'll be able to overcome that on the feet compared to Volkanovski. On the ground, I think, is where it changes, but I think technically Volkanovski will be able to keep it on the feet more. But if it does go to the ground and Volkanovski is not in control, that's a hard shift, and that's when I see Volkanovski struggling to swing the other way. But as it stands now, I am picking Volkanovski. But Ortega is not a bad pick to win here.